Oh, perdón, vamos a esperar un momento. We're gonna wait for a moment.
LJ team, you can go ahead and get started.
Hola a todos, mi nombre es Catalina y junto con mis compañeros Rosy, Yaya y Vida Silvestre formamos parte del equipo de justicia del lenguaje para esta conferencia.
Hello, my name is Catalina, and together with Rosie, Yaya, and Vida Silvestre, we form part of the language justice system for this conference.
El equipo de NISAC se ha comprometido a la justicia del lenguaje y esta porción será bilingüe e interpretada del español al inglés y del inglés al español.
NISAG is committed to the language justice, and this portion will be bilingual and interpreted from Spanish to English and from English to Spanish.
The interpretation, la función de interpretación ya está activada.
The interpretation function has already been activated.
Para acceder a la función desde su computadora, busque el globo en la parte inferior de su pantalla y elija la interpretación de idiomas. Luego seleccione su canal de idiomas.
To access the function from your computer, find the globe in the bottom of your screen and choose language interpretation. Then select your language channel.
Para acceder a la función de interpretación desde su teléfono o tableta, busque los 3 puntos en la parte inferior de su pantalla y toque más. Luego, interpretación de idiomas, seleccione su canal de idiomas y toque finalizar. Este último paso es el que activa la función.
To access the function from your phone or tablet, find the 3 dots in the bottom of your screen and select More. The language interpretation, select your language channel and click Done. This last step is what activates the function.
Toda persona debe elegir un canal de interpretación a no ser de que entiendan ambos idiomas, inglés y español.
Everyone should choose a language channel, unless you fully understand English and Spanish.
Si tiene alguna dificultad accediendo a la función de interpretación, por favor, mandarle un mensaje a Shea por el chat y le ayudarán a resolverlo.
If you are having any issues with accessing the interpretation function, please send a chat message to Shea and they will support you in solving any issues.
Muy bien, entonces vamos a empezar con la interpretación simultánea. Vamos a probar los canales.
Okay, now we are going to test the interpretation function. We are going to try the channels.
Ok, entonces en este momento estoy hablando en español. Ya Rosy va a estar en el canal de inglés y deben estar escuchando interpretación ahí. Okay, so now I'm going to switch to English and Rosy should go now to Spanish channel. So folks that are listening to Spanish interpretation should be listening to Rosy interpret what I'm saying now. Looks like it's working very well. I'm going to switch back to Spanish and continue to ground us in some language justice practices. Muy bien, entonces ahora hablando en español, Rosy está en el canal de inglés. Chequeando que sí estamos bien. Ok. Entonces, el crear espacios multilingües es un esfuerzo colectivo y se hace aún más importante en estos espacios agrícolas donde sabemos que la mayoría de personas que sostienen nuestro sistema alimentario hablan múltiples idiomas. Les invitamos a poner en el chat todos los idiomas presentes acá para nombrar, honrar y reconocer que nuestras comunidades son multilingües. Estas son algunas maneras en que todos nosotros podemos apoyar con el compromiso a la justicia del lenguaje durante esta sesión. Pedimos que por favor digan su nombre antes de hablar. Las personas escuchando a la interpretación no siempre se pueden dar cuenta de cuándo el hablante ha cambiado. Sus comentarios en el chat van a ser traducidos en vivo por Yaya y Vida Silvestre. Si pueden, por favor, hagan su comentario en inglés y español para que todos podamos accederlos con más facilidad. Si no, por favor, haga su comentario en el idioma que prefiere y se le traducirá. También asegúrense de, por favor, renombrarse con también sus pronombres de género en su nombre. Por favor, acordarse de volver a seleccionar su canal de idioma al regresar de grupos pequeños. Y de vez en cuando vamos a necesitar comunicarnos con ustedes si están hablando. Para no interrumpir, vamos a usar diferentes señales. Por ejemplo, esta significa hablar más despacio. Y entre todos, hagámosla, practiquémosla. Ok, esta significa hablar en voz alta, hablar más fuerte. Y les pedimos que entre todos la practiquemos también. Esto significa una persona a la vez. Solo podemos interpretar una persona a la vez. Y es posible que hagamos esto, que significa, por favor, pausa o tomar una respiración, tomar una pausa. Y les recordamos también de mantener su micrófono apagado si no están participando. Finalmente, a los escuchantes del canal de interpretación en español, van a notar que usamos terminaciones en E cuando nos referimos a una persona en vez de la tradicional A o O. Esto no es un error de pronunciación, sino es una decisión deliberada para resistir el binario de género y construir la inclusividad de género. Nuevamente, cualquier problema con la interpretación nos dejan saber inmediatamente, mandan un mensaje por el chat. Muchísimas gracias por su compromiso con la justicia del lenguaje.
Thank you, Language Justice Team, Rosie and Catalina, and welcome everyone to our keynote talk with Lorén Spears. Before we get our keynote talk going, we're going to have a short ceremony to honor our 2021 Mutual Aid Awardee, and I am going to introduce one of our beloved board members, Raqui Bey, who will say a few words about the awardee before she comes on. But before we do that, I just wanted to give a tiny little overview of this award. We began giving a mutual aid award in 2017 as an idea from our board to support and help shift resources towards BIPOC-led organizations. NISOG has historically been a white-led organization, and white-led organizations often usually are closer to philanthropy and sources of funding and resources because of white supremacy, not because of anything they've done to earn that right. And as an attempt to shift those resources, we wanted to share some of our own income and funds with our BIPOC partners. We donate 25% of our end of year appeal to a BIPOC-led organization in the conference host city or region. And for the first time this year, we wanted to honor the awardee at our conference and give them an opportunity to share about the work they do so that you all can connect with this organization and give them more visibility. So I'm going to hand it over to Raquib from the Black Urban Growers of Pittsburgh and one of our esteemed board members to say a few words about this year's awardee. Oh. Quiba, you're muted.
I'm sorry. Green greetings. My name is Raquib Jamu Sabaru. Most people call me Quiba. I am a board member for NESOG and the founder and ED of the Black Urban Gardeners and Farmers of Pittsburgh Co-op. It's truly my pleasure to introduce to you Tasheer Battle. She is the founder and CEO of Roots to Empower. Tasheer is a self-taught artist and has been using art as a vehicle to help heal those who have experienced trauma, homelessness, battered women, youth, and returning veterans. Tasheer champions her cause, aligning with various nonprofits that addresses pressing social challenges, including homelessness, mental health, and addiction. Tasheer holds an MPA from Northeastern University and an MA in mental health counseling from Boston's University School of Medicine. Roots to Empower's mission is to improve the life of justice-involved citizens and at-risk young adults in Southern New England. Their work with returning citizens is needed and principle for success re-entry via criminal justice reborn programs. They empower justice-involved citizens and at-risk youth to become business leaders. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcome Tasheer Battles.
Thank you, Rakiba, for that introduction, and I really appreciate the Mutual Aid Award. So my organization, Roots to Empower, is a labor of love that was birthed out of a lived experience, excuse me, with my brother, who was a formerly incarcerated individual in the 90s, who was unable to find employment after his 5-year incarceration and started his own business. So with that in mind, I decided to start my organization as a person that worked at the Department of Corrections here in Rhode Island and seeing my clients recycle in and out of the prison system. So I decided to start Roots to Empower to actually teach people, formerly incarcerated individuals, business skills to help them start businesses in our state of Rhode Island, and using agriculture as the framework to do that. So that's basically who Roots to Empower is. We recently added on at-risk youth because of a lot of our youth in the Tri-City. When I say that, I mean Providence and Pawtucket and Rhode Island, and Pawtucket, the city that I live in. We experience a lot of violence in our cities, these 3 cities in particular, and I wanted to target at-risk youth as well to start ventures and teach them those skills using agriculture as a vehicle to do that. And so that's who Roots to Empower is. And I thank you again for the Mutual Aid Award and giving me your time today.
Quiba, I believe you are up for the next part of the program.
All right. Bear with me. So it's Quiba again. As stated, I'm a board member for NESOG. And one of the reasons I love NESOG is because there's a network of various organizations and countless individuals carrying out farm and food systems work in our region. That includes 12 states and Washington, D.C. Furthermore, I get to meet and work with wonderful folks such as you in love and service for our community. I choose to be on this board because I know there is a need for clear, direct elimination of disparities within our organization and to help serve farmers and food justice heroes. NESOG does amazing work with our youth as well, and this is definitely principle for our future generations. So I'm here today to ask you all for support. NESOG has definitely come a long way from past conferences, and we move forward with fair, just, and equitable practices. So I see in the chat where a lot of you are from, and I'm definitely grateful for you all being here. If you can be kind enough to donate to NESOG, your support will go towards programs like what Tashir is doing. And I'm going to start with $75 myself. You can go to www.nesog.org/donate. We're trying to raise $400 right now. You already had the opportunity to meet and hear from Tashir and what they do at Roots for Empowerment, and her work is definitely awesome. In addition, these funds will go towards scholarship funds for the 2022 conference, and about a third of attendees receive scholarships to attend. That includes youth farmers and underserved individuals as well. These are people holding frontline community identities, and we don't want it to be a cost issue for folks to be able to participate. As Tracy said before, 25% of all these funds raised during the annual appeal will be awarded to an organization for our next conference in that particular host city and state. So if you can please dig into your hearts to give back to NESOG, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Quiba. I'm going to turn it over to Malika. And before I do, I want to thank folks who have already said they're contributing in the chat. And I hope we can keep it going and have a generous mutual aid award to give next year. And you are on.
Yes, thank you all. It's so wonderful to see you this evening. Thank you so much for being here with us. My name is Malika Gilpin, and I am the NESOG Conference Manager. And in 2020, I went to the University of Rhode Island Food Summit. It was great. This was, I think, my second time in Rhode Island. So it was wonderful being able to connect with different folks. And after a day of presentations, you know how that can be. Out walks onto the stage this amazing woman whose grace and powerful message just completely left me in awe and totally inspired. So after hearing her compelling message and learning more about the impactful work of Dr. Lorén Spears, we knew, there wasn't even a question about it. Who was going to be the keynote speaker for our NESOG It Takes a Region conference? Dr. Lorén Spears, tribal councilwoman of the Narragansett, executive director of the Tamaqua Museum, holding a master's in education, a doctorate in humane letters, and a doctorate in education. Dr. Lorén Spears, she is an author, an artist, a teacher. She shares her cultural knowledge with the public through her museum programs, and she's written curriculum and poetry and narratives published in a variety of publications, teaching for over 2 decades. And during that time, she taught in the Newport public school system. And she's also taught at a couple different universities. She also founded No We Tu Wan School, which is associated with the Tamaqua Museum. Dr. Lorén Spears, I can only imagine some of the battles that you fought to preserve the history and advocate for Indigenous people's culture. And some of these battles, we know that there have been some recent huge victories, and I can't wait to hear about some of them tonight. So I am so honored to present to you one of the most extraordinary women of our time, Dr. Lorén Spears.
Well, thank you so much, Malika. That was quite an introduction. Askawi Kwasan, Natasawis, Makasani Pashao at Nahai Gansek, Natasawis, Lorén Spears at English at Nin Nahai Gansek Nahantek, Kanupiam at Aki at Nahai Gansek. So what I said to you in my own language, I certainly love the idea of language justice and the importance of us being able to speak our own languages. I just greeted you and said hello, and that my traditional name is Makasani Pashao, and Malika told you a lot about me and my modern name, I guess you could say, English name. Lorén Spears. I'm, as you know, the executive director of Tamaqua Museum, and I'm thrilled to be here this evening. It is really important for me when we are thinking about the land and from which we're come to acknowledge with a blessing and land acknowledgement. So I'm going to share that with you now. Kanupiam wuchi ni tampawag ka ni tangsawag at aki at nahai gansek.
How's it going? Not good? What's wrong?
Is there a problem?
If folks could please mute themselves so we can devote our attention to Lorén, that would be really helpful.
Katabatash katantwa wuchi wami na wiyanakan wuni tiawank. Katabatash katantwa wuchi wuni kisak. Katabatash katantwa wuchi nipawus ka matakwasag. Katabatash katantwa wuchi kitan. Katabatash katantwa wuchi namas tunapasawag nakeki suwag putampawag ka ashantiawag. Katabatash katantwa wuchi wita. Katabatash katantwa wuchi napeshawag guananan wamsakuk ka honkawag. Katabatash katantwa wuchi peshamwak mashkwak matakwas ka atug. Katabatash katantwa wuchi sokanun kacha usha niampaog ka wayupayanash. Nashvi mishitasham pyangwag kachisatao. Kakantamu wami sakwan kisakwan takwanek ka paponi pashao nashbi wuni tiawank. Katabatash katantwa wuchi wami pamantamwe tian guan siniash. Katabatash katantwa wuchi tuangonash. Katam kwam at anantam mahug ka nashawank. Kanashuwanku kachisumai unkung ginawan. Kakantamu ganau akwane wami pashkoni. Nani pawan maiwi at wutuan tam nukasaki. Katabatash katantwa wuchi wami wanan siniat nukasaki. Katabatash namanatum wuchi wami wani tiawank nuwian nakon. Katabatash wuchi wami kamaguanash namanatum. And so what I said to you in my language in an opening blessing or prayer, welcome to all my friends and relatives to the homelands of the Narragansett Nation. For those of you that don't know a land acknowledgement, I will put in the chat. Oops, that's what I get for copying the chat for the wonderful people that got the award. So now the wrong thing is there. So I will try to do it again. Here we go. I have some resources if you've never done a land acknowledgement on how you might do a land acknowledgement and a map tool that you might use in the future. So there, if you know how to acknowledge, you're welcome to acknowledge in the chat. So let me continue with the prayer. Thank you to the Creator for all the beauty that surrounds us. Thank you, Creator, for this beautiful day. Thank you for the sun and the clouds. Thank you, Creator, for the ocean, the fish, the turtles, the otters, the whales, the clams, and the lobsters. Thank you, Creator, for the forest. Thank you for the birds, the hawks, the eagles, the geese. Thank you, Creator, for the animals, the bears, the rabbit, and the deer. Thank you, Creator, for the rain, thunder, lightning, and winds. With a storm comes a cleansing. We wish all the seasons, spring, summer, fall, and winter, to burst forth with beauty. Thank you, Creator, for all living things. Thank you, Creator, for our ancestors, they who suffered, mind, body, and spirit. Their spirits wash over us. We wish for peace in the future, and we stand together to protect Mother Earth. We hope that all will be able to enjoy the earth and its beauty. Thank you, Creator, for all the beauty that surrounds us. Thank you for all your gifts, Creator. Ninaj, or Amen. As I welcome you and bless this day, I must acknowledge the more than 400 years of conquest, colonization, genocide, land dispossession, enslavement, forced assimilation, detribalization, and erasure of the Narragansett and other indigenous nations of the Americas. I also must acknowledge the bravery, resilience, perseverance, adaptability of our ancestors who ensured our continuation, passing forth our traditional ecological knowledge, language, history, and culture while contributing to the creation of this colony, state, and country. There is no U.S. history without Indigenous peoples' history, and there is no Rhode Island history without Narragansett, Niantic, and other Indigenous peoples' history. This is our homeland since time immemorial. We are still here. May we always remember we are the land. What we do to the land, we do to ourselves. We must care for Mother Earth to ensure our future generations. A land acknowledgement is just the beginning and must be followed by actions. And that is why we established the Indigenous Empowerment Network and represent the museum exhibits and programs from a first-person perspective and partner with many wonderful organizations like yours. Katabatash Akwane Ka'anunantam. Thanks, peace, and blessings. That was just the translation. I didn't know what that was saying. I'm going to share my screen now. You get to see my beautiful grandbaby. That's Minakisu Miquin. There we go. Kamaguanash Namanatum, all creators' gifts. And, you know, when we think about the creator's gifts, everything for us is a gift of the land, the waters, and all of those things in our perspective come from the gifts of the creator. And everything is connected to one another. So even though I'll share some of the specific uses of plants, I always like to remember the intersectionality of it. When I said that my traditional name was Makassini Pashao, it is that flower that's on the front cover of this slide. So for those that didn't know, the moccasin flower or the lady slipper. Nukasaki, Mother Earth. And it's really important for us to think about the cycles of the earth and the seasons and the ideas around our lifeways being wrapped throughout each of these years and these seasons. Those of us that today in the food system and food worlds are thinking about how do we eat close to home? Well, that's a traditional way to be. You're harvesting everything in its time, in its place, in its season. And our stories of our creation, of the way that we came to be here on what today we might refer to as Turtle Island or Nukasaki, the Mother Earth, is that we literally came up out of the mud and were formed by the clay. But if you think about clay and the formation of anything, whether that be a pot, a piece of pottery, it takes water, it takes sun and heat and elements from the waters and the land and the sea, because we temper it with shell, and all of these things come together in essence to form humanity. And so all of our life ways is a word we use that means the jobs of your life, the hunting, the fishing, the gathering, the agriculture, the building of your homes, the making of your tools, the all the things that you need to live, including the games and things that you do for fun or the materials that you use for ceremony. All of those are woven together and they make up your life ways, and they're connected. Everything is connected. And in order to ensure our continuation as a people, we have to protect the earth, because the earth gives us everything that we need. When we're not in balance, and when the earth is not in balance, we're not in balance. And so we need to be in balance. And so it's really important for us, there we go, to think about those seasons of the year and think about those moon cycles. So in our culture and in our tradition, we go by the lunar cycle of the year, 13 Thanksgivings, 13 moons on Turtle's back that represent each of those months, those lunar months, perfect 28 days. And these Thanksgivings go with the seasons. I'll tell you some of my favorite, whether that's maple sugar Thanksgiving, where we're harvesting that Wiconi neep, or strawberry Witta Miniosh, the heartberry, or the green corn harvest, which today, if anyone's ever been to the Narragansett August meeting powwow, which is the oldest recorded Native gathering in the whole United States, keywords recorded, 346 years, I believe, this year. And that's harvesting that early corn and the importance of corn in our community. So 13 Thanksgivings going around the whole seasons, harvesting and giving thanks. And so when we think of the modern American Thanksgiving, which is a bit fictional, mind you, but it's based off of our harvest Thanksgiving, which is really in the early part of October, end of September, beginning of October, after you harvest your crops, you've harvest your squashes and your corn and your hard shelled beans and your melons and your various other crops and edibles that are in nature that we'll talk more about, whether that's mushrooms, for example, or cranberries, which is another Thanksgiving that is really important to our people. You give thanks, you come together, you have ceremony, you say your prayers. It may include ceremonial songs and music. And then you have, just like with any Thanksgiving, when you give thanks and have the ceremony, then you have a feast in that Thanksgiving, and then you have some fun. And that can be music and dance again, but social songs. It can be games, bowl game, hubbub, moccasin game, or games that are like lacrosse and stick ball and other kinds of big games where lots of people are playing. So these are examples in these images of those prayers and of those ceremonies. So this is an image showing you some connection to Wiconi neep, or the sweet water, which is the maple, where you cook down from the liquid water to the syrup, to the sugar, to the candy, if you will, like the hard candy. This birch bark container here is called a makuk, and that actually harvests and catches the sap. And in the picture to the right is a tribal elder cooking down sap. She was doing it with kids, but it's like a 24-hour day job when it's happening. So kids come and go. And next to her is the frame of a witu, or a traditional home. And our communities, that's part of our knowledge. This is part of our lifeways and the intersection. So you are harvesting from the maple tree, but you also can be building things from the barks and getting medicines and materials for your life. This is an example of the shagbok hickory, which of course is medicinal. You can eat the nuts. You can make tools from the wood, whether that's baskets or using branches for oars or other kinds of materials that you need. Each of these things are gifts from the Creator. And we look at all of these gifts in ways where we look at what's edible, what's medicinal, what's spiritual, and what's useful. And in many cases, one plant can be all of the above. And even if it's not overtly a medicinal plant, as in used in ceremony, you're giving thanks for that plant and having ceremony when harvesting. So this is, again, Wita Miniash, the heartberry or the strawberry, thinking about those spring season saquon. There's the fiddlehead ferns. There's medicinal ferns called sweet fern, where you can cure some poison ivy, poison oak. Each of these plants give you medicines, because food is medicine. It is literally medicine and keeps you healthy with the nutrients that it provides, but it also can give you medicine in a spiritual way. So Wita Miniash, the heartberry, is literally a medicine about learning how to forgive others, because people make mistakes and we have quarrels with people, but how do we come together and come to a resolution? And the heartberry is about that. It's about learning how to say you're sorry and how to forgive others when they have to say they're sorry for their actions or their mistakes. And so each of these things, there's so many edibles in the wild, I don't really like that word, in nature, that when I said the wild, I have to decolonize that word out of my vocabulary, because that's a Eurocentric construct of making it as though it wasn't managed or cared for or cared about. And so wild implies no one's using it. And so I've been trying to eradicate that word from my vocabulary to ensure that people understand, before Europeans came here, we were utilizing this land and this landscape in a balanced, managed way. And we're giving thanks to the Creator for all the bounty that is in this ecosystem. This happens to be a picture of one of the early springs when we were planting our Three Sisters garden. And, you know, when we talked about the intersectionality of things, in order to have a garden that's healthy in our traditional way of knowing, you have to intersect fresh water, salt water, plants, and animals. Everything is intersected, and then human ingenuity and muscle, if you will, does the work. So you put fish, seaweed, ground shell into the soil to give it nutrients. You plant in companion planting or symbiotic planting, where things have a relationship with each other. The corn is the big sister and grows up straight and tall and becomes the anchor for the bean, which is the middle sister that grows around the corn stalks, but gives nitrogen back to the soil. And the squash, which is the baby sister, grows with big leaves that help keep the moisture into the ground and into the soil, and also protects it from the hot sun and keeps that moisture in. And so this is really connected to the interrelationship or symbiotic relationship of plants. But these are also spiritual understandings as well. And the idea of that things work together, it's a lesson that we teach our children, and learning how to give and to get and to receive and to give. And it's those important pieces that are the stories and lessons. There's all kinds of plants for your home. This is a nushquito or a longhouse. And it can be made out of white cedar, out of maple, out of birch, out of poplar, the cover. So you have the bent poles that are made out of some certain plants, and the covering that's made out of other. Poplar, just by itself, you can make the bark for your home. You can make teas from the inner bark that are medicinal. You can make oars for your canoes. You can make a dugout canoe. You can do so many things with that one plant. You can make the quiver for your arrows. And these are the relationships we have with these plants. We often call them our relations. So we have these relationships with the plants, and we call them our relations because they are part of our community and our life way, and they're living things that are giving their life for your life. And so we give thanks to them for that, and give thanks to the Creator for those gifts. On the left is a witu, or our home, and it's covered in cattail mats. The image to the right are cattails, which are the plant. In this image, it's showing one use, the use for making mats. But you also can use those pods at the top to line your baby's cradle board, to make it soft like a mattress. You can not only weave those shoots into a mat, but you can eat the tender shoots, you can eat the roots. There's lots of food and medicinal properties that come from this plant. And when we think about traditional ways of knowing, it's that relationship of knowing how the plants can take care of you and in multiple ways. This is bulrush. A lot of people see these along the river or along the estuaries, and most people just think it's water grass and there's nothing much to think about it. But historically, and with artists today, we harvest it to create beautiful mats like this that would line the inside of our homes historically, in the nushquito or longhouse. We also can make bags and baskets out of these materials. The tops, if you look at that plant, it has little seeds. Those seeds are edible, the shoots are edible, the roots are edible. There's even like a syrup that's kind of like a sugar syrup that comes from this plant that is also edible. And so when you think about these gifts of the land, if we know how to care for them, they know how to care for us and give us what we need. We harvest, of course, many different herbal plants, medicines, roots, tubers, whether that's the ground nut. We harvest things and use it in its entirety. You know, if you harvest the bark, then you're using the wood inside. You're using, some of the bark might be a tea or a medicine. You're harvesting the sap, you're harvesting the wood, and you're utilizing it for all different things. In this case, we're showing you a white pine bark basket that my husband Robin actually made. And he's a very talented artist. And he, you know, white pine, you can use the needles and make pine needle tea. You can use the sap, you know, the pine pitch for healing any kind of tear in your birch bark canoe or any birch or any bark baskets. These are the things, there's so many different uses for everything. It's really important that we are connected to them. There's lots of materials that we can make baskets out of. Bark and splints and reeds and grasses, and we'll continue to think about and talk about them as we go. This happens to be the ground nut, which we have this plant on the land where the museum is located. And it's kind of, they often call it the Indian potato because you see when it's boiled, it kind of looks like a potato, but you can actually eat the tuber, the flower, the seeds. There's medicinal properties for it. And these are gifts that are just out there that Creator has put on this earth. And if we maintain enough space for plants to live, it also gives home to insects and animals and birds and gives them what they need. Again, back to balance. When you live in balance, the earth gives you what you need and you have everything. As do the animals. There's, of course, lots of amazing fruits in our ecosystem. There's blueberries and blackberries and huckleberries and chokeberries and black cherries, which are in our yard as well at the museum. Those things, food is medicine, but they give you lots of nutrients and vitamins and have medicinal properties. There's why did the name of the plant go out of my brain? Elderberry, which I don't have in this list. That's a great medicine for colds, where they cook down, our families and our elders cook down and make like a cough syrup. The black cherry also makes a really good syrup for colds and things of that nature. Sassafras is a wonderful tea. It has a light, fragrant taste. It might taste like what you might think of as sarsaparilla or root beer, has kind of that flavor. It's a unique plant. It's got 3 different leaf patterns, no fingers, a thumb, and then a pinky. So it's very easy to identify. We have beach plums. There's just so many. We really have an amazing ecosystem here of the forest, the field, the salt ponds, the fresh waters, the estuaries, the bay, the open ocean. There's just so many gifts of the land. This happens to be milkweed, which you can use medicinally, and you also can use to create fibers for baskets and bags and cordage for ropes and nets and the things that you need in your life. If you're hunting, fishing, gathering, you need to make those things for your community. And of course, these are also great pollinators, which are important today. We know that we're having a struggle with the loss of pollinators with all the spraying that happens here. I'm going to hold these couple of baskets up here. This is a really beautiful basket that's made with coils of grasses. It's a coil basket. And then this one, that one I didn't make. That one we brought back from another neighboring tribe. This one happens to be a little tiny pine needle basket. And so we were talking about pine needles before. This one I actually made. I have others that I made, but they're at work at the moment and I'm at home. But these are the kinds of things like the sweetgrass where we can harvest it and we can turn it into those baskets. These really long pine needles, which you can get in other states. And so these are things that can be turned into baskets, just like the cordage from the milkweed can be turned into cordage to make string for tools, but also cordage for coil baskets, coil bags, armbands, leg garters, sashes, belts, those kinds of things. And so we call that traditional finger weaving or twining to make those kinds of things. So in our way, we would have traditionally a winter home in the inland areas by the fresh water where you can hunt, fish, and gather near the fresh waters. And in the summertime, we are by the ocean, the bay, the estuaries, where we can also hunt, fish, and gather, but also grow our agriculture. And it's really important for us. Of course, during that time, you're also repairing canoes, making tools. I always like to envision in my mind, I want you to kind of picture being in a canoe, any canoe you've ever been in or seen, And now you're going out into the ocean in said canoe. And there's several of them with people in them, but our canoes were really big and long and could fit 20 or more people in them. And that gives you an idea of the depth and breadth of the size of our forests then. And if you think of that tulip poplar tree, whatever the biggest tree you can think of today, and that you made this dugout canoe, and it's called a dugout because you fell the tree with coals and then you burn into it and then dig out the coals to create the cavern of the canoe. And in this canoe, you're with teams of people in multiple canoes. And what are you doing? You're whaling. You're going to hunt a whale. And now in my modern American mind of the 21st century, that is beyond my comprehension. To envision my ancestors in teams, talk about coordination, you know, having ceremony before, ceremony during, ceremony in the actual act of harvesting or hunting this mammoth animal. But knowing that if you are successful, that it will ensure the sustainability, not just of you and your family, but whole villages of people up and down the coastline here, multiple villages within your nation would be fed for many, many days. And the teamwork that it took to do that, and that you would have to have made your stone tools like your spear points and having your spears be strong, and then your addle, which is kind of a tool that projects the spear and helps it have more torque and velocity to do that. But the idea of the synchronization of multiple canoes and multiple groups of people hunting that one whale in order to sustain your people and to have the gifts of that whale, whether that's the gifts of the baleen or the meat or the blubber or the oils that come from it, and the list goes on. Of course, our ancestors were very good at using all of those materials. And so when you think about those weaving materials like the milkweed I mentioned before, and the dogbane and the nettle, those were used and twined to make nets and other kinds of tools. There were baskets used for harvesting your shell. Well, you harvest it and then you store it in the basket, but in the water, so the water still keeps them living, your shellfish, your quahog, your whelks, your steamers, as we call them today. Here is an example of a basket made from another cordage called dogbane. And just the beauty of, that's actually a twined basket versus a finger woven basket. It's a little different technique. This is just showing you a nettle ball of yarn, because most people ignore nettle as though, because it's prickly. And people, when they walk through it, they're not happy about it. It's itchy. And so most people just looks like a big weed. But guess what? Nettle is edible. It's like spinach, right? Nettle is like a medicinal. It's a tea that you can make. But nettle also can give you this amazing yarn or cordage to make baskets, bags, belts, sashes, anything that you can make with cordage. So there's such gifts of the land. Here's an example of some of the tools for fishing and hunting, knives and hooks and net, scrapers and drills and fishing weights, arrow points, spear points, you name it. Fishing weirs, which is this example to the right, which is a basket weir. It's not a basket trap. It's sometimes called that, but that's actually a misnomer because it's open at the front and open at the back. A basket trap would mean the bottom of the basket would be closed and, you know, woven together. If you notice the top picture, it shows that the fronds of the splints are just hanging loose because that was used in a brook or a river. And it was meant when fish were spawning upstream for you to slow them down. So if it was the herring run or the salmon run, to give an example, then you would slow them down, in which you could then spear them with your spear or use your nets to catch them. And our goal was, again, balance. It was slowing them down enough so that you could get some to feed your families and communities during that early springtime when your gardens have not grown and other things are not accessible, but not take so many that you interrupt the cycle of life for those fish, so that you would have the continuation and the bounty for the next season, the next year that they were running. Here's some great tools. This happens to be a mortar and pestle on the lower spot with some flint corn. I'm sure my brother-in-law Cassius was talking to you about Narragansett flint corn, which is still a hard kerneled corn, flint corn, but it's completely yellow. There's hundreds of varieties of flint corn from the Americas. But in that stone mortar and pestle, you grind it and make your cornmeal, your yokeg or nokeg, depending on the dialect of Algonquian speaking people. And you can make that into a journey cake, or what today we call a Johnny cake. That tool over there, I think we lost the words somewhere along the line. That is a deer shoulder hoe. And so it's a garden tool. We would use deer antlers for rakes. We would use shells, because shells, quahog shells today are, big, but in our history, they were even bigger. And we would use those shells as hoes in our garden. If you're going to eat a deer, you use as much of that deer as possible. So you use all the bone, all the antler, all the meat, all the sinew or tendons for sewing. We'd make needles and get your thread and get your leather, if you will, or deer skin or hide. You'd make musical instruments, you'd make carrying bags. Everything, like literally everything of the deer can be utilized. And that's true for every animal that you're harvesting. If you're going to eat it, then utilize it to its fullest. Today, so my husband, as I mentioned, is an artist. These are deer bone earrings, I believe. Either deer bone or antler. I can't remember which ones I've got on. But nonetheless, he uses both bone and antler in his jewelry and in his artwork, as do many artists today. So this is a lovely set of pictures. We've talked quite a bit about the Three Sisters Garden, so I probably won't say all of these things again, but it's a nice image of the corn growing. In the middle, that's a corn husk mat that's from our collection, because not only do you eat the corn, not only do you have the history and the stories about how they came to us that are lessons for your children, not only do we have this symbiotic relationship of the corn, bean, and squash and the skill around agriculture, but you also have that the corn is useful in other ways besides edible. You're using the corn husk to make that corn husk mat, to make corn husk dolls. It's used in ceremony. The pollen or the seeds, if you will, the tiny, tiny seeds of corn is often used in birth ceremonies because it is considered a symbol of fertility. The corn itself is considered a symbol of fertility, because when the crow brought us the corn from the corn and the bean from the Southwest, but particularly the corn, it gave us this sustaining food that ensured our sustainability over the long winters, because flint corn stays with you all throughout the winter and into the early spring. Before you've planted again, you still have that corn for your yokeg and your journey cake, and you have that as a base for your diet. And it was so important and gave our whole community sustainability. It's considered so important to our community and a gift of fertility, meaning longevity and continuation and generational growth of your families and community. So corn is extraordinarily important. There were other crops like onions and gourds and melons in our gardens. To name just a few, it was the gardening is extremely important and still very much part of our community. As you heard from Cassius about the Narragansett Food Sovereignty Initiative and Ashwaubenon Farm, but there's also the Petasquamsket gardeners, who are another group of Narragansett people that are working on smaller size gardens all around in different people's sort of, I'll call it bigger town areas rather than very rural areas, but town areas, to ensure that there's this sustainability of traditional foods and traditional gardening. There's lots of people in our community doing it sort of on their own, even young people like my son and my daughter-in-law who are farming just in our own yard and doing a lot of harvesting and getting wild edibles. I'm supposed to not say that word. Forested edibles from our community, whether that's wild mushrooms, medicinals, edibles, all of those things are being harvested. And of course, you can't go full circle. If you're going to harvest things, then you're going to cook things. It's very important. So, you know, I think it's really important for us to think about traditional harvesting and traditional ways of knowing things. I've done some oral history projects with elders in our community, and, you know, my own family does traditional clam bakes and, you know, harvesting the seaweed and creating the layers in the ground. But there are many others in our community that have done the same. Folks down at Mashpee wrote a great book called Clam Bake that kind of shows that process of their community doing it, but it's a very similar process. And the idea of the use of the seaweed and the shellfish and the fish, making, you know, chowder with, you know, the potatoes and other tubers, and the different kinds of summer Thanksgivings. We mentioned some before, but there's the green corn Thanksgiving, the green bean Thanksgiving, and there's all this work that goes with gardening, you know, not only the growing, but when you're harvesting, there's drying, there's smoking, and using plant life for that smoking, whether it's hickory wood or maple. Like my son, he made pemmican, which is dried venison, if you will, often pounded with sunflower seeds and cranberries, but he used maple wood. So when he was cooking it, it had such a sweet taste to it. It was delightful. And each of these things are gifts. And so back to the pottery at the beginning, when we were talking about it and harvesting it from the water, it's, you need that pot to cook your food, to store your food, to store your seeds. You know, we wouldn't have heritage seed today if people didn't save them and store them and ensure that they weren't cross-contaminated with other plants. So there's all these gifts of the land and the waters. These are one of my favorite things. These are rose hips. We are, in our family, are always astounded by, like, you know, rose hips are often found. You can have winter rose hips. No, I said that wrong. You can have woodland rose hips, but they're quite a bit smaller, or ocean rose hips, which are quite a bit bigger in my experience. But they're a fruit, and you can just pick them off the rose bush and eat them. And we're always by the salt waters, and it always seems like someone comes up to us and is like, what are you doing? Why are you eating those? And we're like, it's a food. You can eat them. They're sweet, but you can also cook them down and make them into jams or jellies or just a fruit spread. I personally love to put rose hips cooked down on a roast, like a roast pork or a roast venison, any kind of sort of darker, denser meat. Tastes phenomenal on that. So, you know, it's a great way to eat those foods and preserve them for future times. You can make a rose hip tea. And it's got a lot of nutrients and medicinal values. I've mentioned the journey cake or the Johnny cake several times, and here's a picture of them with wild blueberries and fresh maple syrup, not fictional maple syrup, which is just corn syrup mostly. No offense to the corn, because I love corn, but it's not the same as maple syrup in this context. It's, you know, such a healthy thing. And, you know, they were called journey cakes because you could take them on a journey. When they were just the cake made traditionally with parched with boiling water, and then maybe recooked again on a hot stone, kind of as a griddle, if you will, to give that cake consistency. You could take that in your pouch and go on a journey. If you took a journey cake, some pemmican, it's an indigenous MRE, meals ready to eat. It's, you know, cornmeal, it's a protein, a starch, and then in the protein, you've got cranberries and sunflower seeds or other berries. And you could also have just dried berries in that with like dried cranberries. And you have a really nutritious meal when you're traveling from one village to the other. You're going on a hunt or going on a time when you're going to go to a like maple sugaring location where you were going to be for a while, but you had to get there. So anything that you're doing. So as I mentioned to you all throughout this, ceremony is intersected with all of this. It's part of our lives. You know, you give thanks to the Creator for the gifts that you're given in order to ensure your life. And so whether it is the sweetgrass, or which I'm smelling in that picture, and we were harvesting before the floods of 2010 that ruined it, or if it's sage, which is not really from this area, but has been adopted because Native communities often have ceremony together and we share our medicinals, and over time they get into different places. So you have sweetgrass, sage, tobacco, cedar. That's really important to us. We have these various cleansing ceremonies. Some of them are in the ocean or near the ocean and then in the ocean. Others are sweat lodge ceremonies that are really important for cleansing your mind, body, and spirit, and all the different sacred herbs, tobacco, sweetgrass, sage, and cedar. The first three are indigenous to this place, and the fourth one is a traded item. There are ceremonial songs, and there are ceremonial musical instruments that you can use for those songs, and dances that are ceremony as well. I think I'll sing you a song. This song is Unaweekend, We Dwell Here. It's the idea that this is our land, our home, our stories are here, our language is here, our culture, our life ways, our norms are here. Everything we know about who we are as, in my case, a Narragansett Niantic woman, comes from this place, comes from the stories of our ancestors, the trials and tribulations they went through to ensure that we're here today. It is literally means we dwell here. And it's the idea that our blood of our ancestors is in this land. Our ancestors are here and we're here today and we remember them. You know how weekend, you know how weekend, you know weekend, we hey you know weekend, oh. Way ha, way ha, way oh way ha, way ha, way ha, way oh way ha. You know weekend, you know weekend, way hey you know weekend, oh. Way ha, way ha, way oh way ha, way ha, way ha, way oh way ha. You know weekend, wait hey yo no weekend. Once for the past, once for the present, and once for the future. In this image here, this is actually at the Narragansett August Meeting Powwow, and they're actually doing a ceremonial dance that's known as the Calumet, where the medicine man or the medicinal, the spiritual leaders have done the ceremony, and the men in this case, because they're the ones that carry and plant and harvest the tobacco, they are doing the dance that represents the stem and the bowl of the pipe of that ceremony, and that pipe and that smoke and that tobacco sends the prayers to the creator, and they're representing that. In the bottom, I'm showing images of soapstone pipes, and of course that stone comes from this land. Tequanic, autumn or fall, the harvest time, and we've talked a lot about corn, beans, and squash. Sunflower seeds are another one of those things that I've mentioned earlier that are harvest. The choke, sun chokes, you can harvest as well and eat the roots, amongst many other things in our ecosystem. This is my nephew, Yoyache Nakoni Makwanta Mayash. His name means he who remembers the old ways. He's now 11. He's got a big name to live into, but you know, he's got an old spirit in his heart. So I believe that he will indeed carry on that name and that tradition of remembering his culture and community and passing on those that information from one generation to the other. And he's there with a corn husk doll from one of our Children's Hour programs at Tamaquag Museum, which is another way in which our community can help pass along these traditions while at the same time educating others. This is harvesting. That picture is, oh, it's got sunchokes in the back. It's my son Ridge with, he's now 25, and the grandson is his son, and he's got a wild mushroom there. Of course, you can harvest acorns. You have to process them because they've got a lot of tannin in them, but that tannin is great for dyeing things. You can get the black walnuts, which is also good for dyeing and edible as well, and good for the fertility of your soil. Black walnut trees show great fertility. There's grapes to harvest in the fall, amongst, you know, other kinds of mushrooms. There's a myriad of mushrooms: hen of the wood, chicken of the forest. There's the beefsteak mushroom, the puffer mushroom, the black trumpet. There's so many that we harvest and eat in our community that are here. And this was a particularly great year for harvesting mushrooms, as was last year. Here is some examples of baskets from our collection. That one that I'm holding is a corn washing basket that the students of Nuituan School made with an artist. These are cranberries. This is what cranberries look like in the wild. It's not how they look on TV. On TV, you think you're always underwater 6 feet, I guess. It's not really that way. They flood the bogs to make it look like that for manufactured cranberries. Wild cranberries, nature does its job. In the spring, it floods the banks of the pond or the rivers that they're growing, or the estuaries that it's growing near. And as the summer progresses, the water recedes. And by fall, you have the beautiful crane berry, which is what they were usually called because they tip over like the crane's head. So you kind of have to use your fingers underneath, which is why they created those machines that do like this. They flood them because cranberries, they float. But as we know, they're very important in our diet, very medicinal, give us lots of vitamin C over the winter and dry beautifully. This is some winter. It's important. Snow gives you cleansing, and also lots of games and tools like snowshoes, and games like Snow Snake that the kids are playing up in the picture. And then you also have ice fishing and storytelling and storytelling moons, where you do lots of your inside storytelling, and the Nakomo, which is a Thanksgiving where you give gifts to others. Let me rephrase that. We call it the giveaway. So it's not a reciprocal, I give you a gift, you give me a gift. It's giving away. And in our culture and in our community, the one that gives the most is considered the most respected and most honored, but they're not getting something in the giving. They're just giving. And Raj Williams is quoted in one of the books that he wrote, that he thought that we gave away more than our means, that we gave away more than we had to give. But it's about, we call it today, giving until it hurts kind of thing. Like if the gift is not a gift you wish you could keep, then it's not a good enough gift. Like if you are giving this basket, you have to give it with your whole heart, and you have to have thought that it was the most special gift that you could find for that person. And so we would play indoor games with storytelling, games like Hubbub, and harvest gifts of the land like the winter berries, pine and cedar and other evergreens throughout the winter months. So to wrap it up here, everything is connected to the celestials, Nipawus, the sun, Nakwasag, the stars, the moon, Nanapashet, to the lunar cycle, to the equinoxes. We have ceremonial landscapes here where our ancestors put these stones in certain configurations that actually mark the summer, winter, fall, and spring equinoxes. There is ceremony in living in our lives. There's a time to plant, a time to gather, a time to rest, time to give thanks. It's important. So food sovereignty, which you spoke with quite a bit, I just want to kind of reiterate that for us today, food sovereignty and food sovereignty movements is about access to waterways, access to resources, access to hunting, fishing, gathering, agriculture, equity, ecological equity, economic equity, environmental justice, land rights, land back. As someone mentioned at the beginning, small victories. The Narragansett tribe just received the land back around the Great Swamp Memorial Site. We need to continue to work toward more land back and to access to those hunting, fishing rights that we deserve as Indigenous people. If it was up to me, when we pull out our tribal ID, that would be our right. This is our homeland. These are our lands. These are our waters, and these are our lifeways. So native ways of knowing. I think that this image here of Roaring Brook, which is right next to Tamaquag Museum, which I grew up around, that I fished in with my cousin Sean. He really did the fishing and I did the talking. That's how I got this job, because that's my gift. This brook is a beautiful brook and it roars. And then I'm there with one of my daughter-in-laws at the cranberry location where we harvest cranberries. There is a pond near there too, but we're on the shores. It's really important for us to think we are the earth. What we do to the earth, we do to ourselves. So we must care for the earth in order to care for ourselves. So I'm going to stop sharing there so that maybe you have questions or comments that you would like to say. I just would say that one more thing, that everything that we do, everything that I do, but everything the way that I've been taught, everything that we do is for the next 7 generations that come. And so when I think of my own children, my grandchild, that's only 3 generations. If I include my mom's generation now, that's 4 generations that are living. I need to go out 3 more generations. And what is my impact going to be? How am I going to ensure the sustainability for for that generation, 7 out. The sustainability of the land, the sustainability of our culture, the sustainability of our communities, the sustainability of our society, you know, as a whole, all people, because we must live on this earth together. So how do we improve that for everyone to ensure that all of our next generations can be successful? And my version of success is not a Eurocentric version. Successful means living in balance with the land and with each other, in relationship with the land, with the animals, with the plants, with each other. So if there's questions, I'm more than happy to have people, I don't know how you're asking them, whether they're popping on themselves and asking, or if they're putting it in the chat and asking.
Lorén, I was sorry, my daughter's in the background. I was going to ask if we could support you on Q&A by having folks put stack in the chat or use the raise hand function, and then we can have a little bit of order to it. There's also been a number of questions that have come up in the chat that maybe we could start with. And Malika, if you could moderate this, since I have a rabid toddler in the background, that would be great.
Sure, because it's hard for me to see the questions.
Yeah, I think one of the first questions that came in was from Freedom, and Freedom wanted to know, how was the plant classified as medicine? I always wondered how the knowledge was created.
That's a great question. So I personally think that we, you know, just like anyone in humanity, it's trial and error. I mean, plant knowledge, you learn it along the way. I'm sure there were people along the way that got sick from certain plants, but if you got sick when you ate it, then you found out, oh, I could make a tea from it and just use it in a smaller dose, and it did what you wanted it to do. I mean, our medicine people in our communities that are really knowledgeable, like my late father-in-law was extraordinarily knowledgeable about plant medicines. And I would go, there's some that I know, there are things that, you know, most of us know and just can do, but there's others that are complicated where you're using a little bit of this and a little bit of that. You know, people that are doctors today, they go through a lot of training, and people that are traditional healers, they also go through training through their lives and understanding what you need for those medicines and what works in what way. And sometimes it's because it's been passed down generationally from one to the other. But I couldn't say how it began per se. But it is a lot of trial and error. There is a lot of knowledge that's passed down on how you harvest something, how you process something, and how you utilize something, like knowing whether it's the roots that you're using, whether it's the stalk that you're using, whether it's the seeds that you're using, and what each one's being used for. Because different plants have different purposes. So some of them are edible, some of them are medicinal, some of them are spiritual, some of them are useful, and sometimes they're all of the above. Let's see if I can see the other questions.
And feel free to raise your hand if you have questions that you'd like to use your own voice to speak.
And if you can see a question, let me know, because I maybe can't see them all. I'm trying to look through them right now.
There's one more that I see in here. It says, I don't quite understand. I don't know, Freedom, if you want to come on and share. Is your land without ID? We are renting and we don't pay a fraction of what we owe you. Let's get free. So it's a question about ID. Do you want to expand on that, Freedom?
So I don't know if I quite caught it all, but I will try. I think that when we're thinking about the land, that this is a land that is a settler colonial space, and it's conquest. And conquest is not just physical. It's physical, it's mental, it's spiritual. And so when you think about the exhibit that we're doing right now on the Away from Home, the American Indian boarding school experience or stories, that was an overt tactic of conquest. Conquest is about greed for the resources. Those are the resources of the lands and the waters, but they're also the human resources. It's power, political power, military power, economic power, weaponry power, every structure of power. It's about entitlement, which is another kind of power, that notion of thinking that in your own head that you have the right to do something. It is censure or silencing the people, no access to those. You don't have the vote. You're not a citizen. You don't have positions of power that give you equity. You're silenced in the history. Memorialize the victor and like fade into the sunset the oppressed. You are so greed, power, entitlement. Oh, I skipped one: fear and hate, breeding fear and creating hate. And that's, kind of like our Declaration of Independence that says merciless Indian savages whose known rules of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. That was rhetoric to breed fear and hate, despite the fact that we fought in the Revolutionary War, despite the fact that they were just trying to take our lands, and they wanted to go westward and get more land. And then force assimilation, which is the boarding school system, it's Christianization, it's forced assimilative practices, the forcing you to speak English, forcing you to change your look, your hairstyle, your clothing, learn new types of jobs. And of course, they're the most menial, but nonetheless, different like Eurocentric jobs, to stop you from practicing your own tradition and your religion and your own spirituality and your own life ways. They literally took our children from us and took them clear across the country, in some cases, into these boarding schools to like fully indoctrinate. I think it was Pratt that said, kill the Indian, save the man. And the idea was to literally eradicate who we were by, cutting our hair, changing our clothes, forced militarized education to do that. So when we talk about the land, all of this was about conquest and for the land and its resources, and they stole the land. They can say they bought this and they bought that, but every single bit of it was a manipulation. When you talk about land grant institutions, like universities that are land grant institutions, URI has acknowledged that they're a land grant institution. They acknowledge that they got the money from taking the land from a tribe in Kansas in order to quote unquote get the land here in a quote unquote purchase. So these are the kinds of things that are happening when you talk about land and land access. We need more land and more land access. It's hard to hunt, fish, gather if the land base dwindles and dwindles and dwindles to the point where there's no place to do it because there's nothing but houses in the way. That when the houses are on the waterways that are wrecking your salt marshes and you can't have access to the shellfish, or there's, as someone put, pipelines going up and LNG terminals and Superfund sites in urban areas that are because of the degradation and the pollution from modernity. There's this notion that being modern is better. But we're all going to find very soon as humanity, it might be our most tragic mistake. I mean, we only have one planet to live on. And we need to care for it. As I stated before, it's really important for us to care for and ensure that our lands are in balance, that we have the resources to be in balance, and we need to push our political leaders to create strategies in which we all can partake in doing our part on ensuring equity and in this world, but also to create balance environmentally.
Yes, yes, absolutely. We have time for one more, and so I'm gonna, I saw that somebody asked about resources, and you posted in the chat, you can find a wonderful website. So this will take you right to the Tamaqua Museum website, which has a whole resource section. So I'm sure you'll be able to find a lot there. Also, this is recorded, so we'll be sharing this with you. So you'll be able to see the PowerPoint again through this recording. The last question is from Tarshir, and it says, has there been a move toward ID cards and or land acquisition?
So we have tribal enrollment cards. So as I think I said at the beginning that I'm Narragansett Niantic, that's who I am, but I am an enrolled citizen of the Narragansett Nation. If I didn't say that clearly earlier, I can't recall. So we do have tribal ID cards, and it's just like a driver's license. It's got the same holographic kind of things, all the same birth date and things like that. When your children are under 18, their enrollment number is also on the back of your card. Personally, I think if you have that, you should have access to hunting and fishing on any open land, hunting, fishing, gathering, particularly gathering as well, because there's just so many, resources out there that can be difficult sometimes to have access to. And, we're always working toward land back, I think. I don't know specifically what the tribal nation, the government is working on. I mean, they just finished that big project on the land for the Great Swamp Memorial Site. But I'm sure they're working on others. There's a really wonderful organization called the Rematriation. I don't know if it says project after it, but it's Rematriation. And they're doing a lot of work with land back. So, and it's we're matrilineal people. So the idea of rematriation and the giving back and the healing that comes from the land, that's so critical. And so I think, our community, we're always, I think people sometimes think of it as, oh, Native people, they're connected to the land, and it kind of gets kind of new agey and kind of mystical and magical in some kind of way. That's not what's intended. It's just a reality. It's kind of like saying water is life. Nipana Kitiawank, water is life. People think of that as a cliche, related to protests against the pipeline. But what they don't get is that it's a truth. Literally, every one of us, humanity, animal, plant, we need water to live. And when we really take the moment to really think of those words and their true depth of meaning, then we pause and we realize that it's a truth. And if water is life, then why are we not caring for the water? Why are we letting so many pollutants go in the water, whether that's pipelines, whether that's toxins from all kinds of things? We all need air. So you could say air is life as well, but yet we're doing the same thing there. We're polluting the air. Our fish are filled with PCBs and lead and this thing and that thing. And they're going, it's not in the water, but somehow the fish have it. They think it's from air pollution and the microorganisms, the micro particles of oxygen that get into the water that's now polluting the fish. It doesn't even make any sense, but we're not caring for it. We're allowing all big business and what have you to control how they pollute the earth. And a lot of times in the imagery, they make it the individual person's fault, like, oh, that can of Coke on the ground, that's what did it, as opposed to the big corporations that are putting so much toxins into the air, into the water, into the earth, but they illustrate it as though it's the individual person's fault. And so until we have the political clout to change the way that big business pollutes, we're just scratching the surface on changing and in healing the earth. But I do believe the earth can be healed. I think if we can live in balance with the earth, our elders and talk to the changes in the land here all the time on where the cranberries once were, where this medicinal plant used to be, where such and such used to be. Well, it's because the lands are changing, and they're changing because we're overbuilding, we're overpopulated, and things that should be vernal pools and wetlands, they've put pipes under the ground and try to divert it because they want to have the nice neighborhood. They want to have the green lawns. They're spraying everything, and they're killing the indigenous plants and indigenous animals that need those plants. And it's all for pristine, quote unquote, grass. That is not really our most important thing. The things that we really need are the indigenous plants that were already here, that were part of this ecosystem, that give you all these gifts. And some of these ornamental things that we are putting in their place, they're just that, ornamental. They don't have an edible value. They don't have a medicinal value, often don't have a spiritual value other than they're a living thing. And maybe no useful value other than being pretty. It's a shame that we're not caring for it more. And hopefully groups like yours and organizations like ours and all these collective organizations working on these issues will continue to push forward and ensure that we start to live in balance on this earth.
Yes. And just, you sharing so much wisdom with us, it just inspires us even more to keep on pushing forward. And we are so grateful for you and the work that you do. And thank you so much. I know everybody on here is just gonna walk away from this tonight feeling, like ready to just push even harder to find that balance and to create that balance. And so we are so grateful for you. And I just want to thank you again. It's been an honor to be here with you tonight. I want to remind folks that tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., we have Angel Mendez's keynote speech at 10 in the morning. And then we are back with Dr. Lorén. So she is going to be making Johnny cakes with us. I'm so excited. I'm like ready to go grab my maple syrup. And so don't miss out tomorrow. We have more for you. Thank you all and have a beautiful rest of your evening. Good night. Peace.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.